So welcome. A big thank you to everyone for showing up with your big open hearts, sharing yourself with me. Thank you for the ongoing donations and support and kind words, all the emails. So there's a lot I wanted to speak about tonight, and of course, if any of you have live questions, I welcome those. If you have questions you want to leave in the chat, of course, those are welcome as well. I first just wanted to say something about this moment in history. Right now, with the incredible stress that's happening here on planet Earth, we're facing, ecological destruction, this mysterious pandemic which arose out of the darkness and is creating great difficulty for most of us. And, the pressure that brings, anytime the world is facing a crisis will bring forth, all the shadows, all the festering wounds, all the things that we've ignored and denied. But crisis can also bring forth an opportunity for our strength to shine. And humanity is at this tipping point right now about how are we going to respond. So recently in the United States there were a number of outward displays of immense racial inequality, which was recorded and then broadcast to the masses. And the beautiful thing about, a cell phone is when something records something, basically we all get an opportunity to look at a moment of reality. And by reality, I mean a relative reality. And so this past couple weeks, we've had some big moments, of immense racism was recorded. And then this was broadcast to the masses, and there is rioting that's happening in the streets, people lighting things on fire, burning things down, attacking police officers, and police officers attacking the public, and the riot squads out, and the National Guard being called in. And we must look and ask ourselves, how will I respond to what's happening here on planet Earth? How will I respond? Am I going to respond from the perspective of my politics, which tells me what to do? If you're a liberal, you're supposed to be throwing empty water bottles or rocks or whatever it is. Or maybe peacefully protesting for an hour and then violently protesting as the evening goes on. And if we're a conservative, we're supposed to support the police. And again, all this, it's just the same play over and over and over again. But how many of us are willing to look in our hearts and ask, what is the truth? Despite my conditioning, my mind telling me what to do, what woke culture is telling me what to do, what my community is telling me what to do, what my news station is telling me what to do. How many of us are willing to listen to our heart? Not our emotional heart, but our true heart. And within the space of our true heart is wisdom, immense wisdom. So if we give ourselves permission to press the pause button and to ask, what is actually true for me? If there's racial inequality, is it true for me to go into the streets and light stuff on fire? Is that what's true for me? To overturn vehicles? Is that what's true? If there's confusion within my own Sangha, within my community, which train am I going to jump on? The train of attacking or gossiping or just being overwhelmed like everyone else is? Or can I come into my heart and be a beacon of light? And one of the things that deeply impresses me about those who are showing up, that you're choosing to be a beacon of light in a time of darkness. You're choosing to remain calm. You're choosing to respond with love. And this is a question we must sit with again and again and again. Is how does love respond during a pandemic? How does love respond if people are rioting in the streets? Does love listen to those in pain and respond with love on all sides? Or does love go and get some gasoline and light things on fire? Like, what is the truth here? Are we willing to sit in the truth? Are we willing to sit in the heat, the stress, the overwhelm, and be with our own emotional experience? Most of us have had to walk through this pandemic and face fear on a daily basis. Face fear. Is it safe for me to go to the grocery store? Is it safe for me to go back to work? Is it safe for me to say hi to a neighbor? Am I standing too close? Am I going to get sick and die? And so we've been facing fear. And most of us have been remaining fairly calm in regards to the pandemic. But the problem with human beings is we're not just meant to sit and do nothing all day. We have this energy, this expressive energy. We have expressive emotions and expressive hearts. We have these gifts within us which are meant to be used. And so if we're told to stay home, what is it? Stay safe, stay home, whatever the hashtag is. If we stay inside for 6 weeks, 6 months, whatever it is, whatever we're supposed to do. So here's a question that actually relates to Minneapolis. And this is from Kyle. Hi, Craig. I live an hour from Minneapolis and have 2 friends who live 8 blocks from where George Floyd was murdered by police. There are thousands of angry people in the neighborhood. Can you speak about collective anger, oppression, protesting in a spiritual perspective? How do we know when we should act politically and socially? Yeah, Kyle, and this is a great question, and I appreciate your question coming forward. I was starting to speak about that when we were getting our own protest here, and we can see how oftentimes futile protesting can be, when we're just throwing rocks and causing chaos and confusion in the world. And so the individuals who showed up this evening, causing this distraction, they weren't listening to their hearts. They weren't listening to the truth of what's within them. Oftentimes individuals who do begin to throw things and become violent and attack others, they feel disempowered. And so it's important to look at, the conversation on the spiritual path of how can power manifest itself in a healthy way, in a way that's effective, in a way that's supportive, in a way that's in alignment with truth. If you look at some of the spiritual greats, Gandhi and Martin Luther King, Here were two individuals who chose to protest, but they did so non-violently. They showed up with a strength of will, a strength of character. They showed up from a place of love. A place of love and strength and clarity. If we don't have love, strength, and clarity in whatever our actions are, we're going to have confusion there. And we're going to create karma. And so sometimes, the best thing to do when chaos is happening is just to take this giant step back and see from the vast view, what is actually happening here? What's actually happening? Do I have faith in my own truth? Do I have faith in the healing of others, the healing of the world, the healing of the planet? Do I have faith? When we don't have faith, we light things on fire. When we do have faith, we engage in dialogue. We engage in dialogue. One of the things that I was trained in early on was what's called victim-offender dialogue. And I would sit in a room, with someone who was a victim, of some great crime, and with the offender. And I had to develop this skill of holding space while there's a lot of tension, a lot of heat in the room, a lot of fury. And I have to admit, I was young and I was very, very uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable to sit in this room. Well, two people were angry. They wanted to be at each other's throats. And if you can imagine just sitting with someone who committed, let's say an outrageous crime, and then sitting with the victim and holding this space for both. This is oftentimes what's required of a Buddha, of a Bodhisattva, is this willingness to hold both sides, the victim and the offender, and all the complexity of it all. And not to look at the victim and say, oh, you will never heal. You are so traumatized, you'll never heal. You have to look at the victim and say, I see that you are a Buddha, a goddess, a divine being. I see that you are capable of healing. But we must also, with the offender, I had to look at this individual and see that they too were God, that they too had a heart, that they too had the possibility, the potential to heal, that they had the potential to heal. And so this is a space of love that we're creating. And love, it has to start with us. We can't demand Donald Trump to create a container of love. We can't demand Nancy Pelosi or whoever it is. Our leaders right now are really dropping the ball. We must be the leaders. We must be the Buddhas. We must be the lights. And in order to do this effectively, you must first step back. Because anytime crisis arises, the first thing that steps forward is the fight or flight response, the emotion, the woundedness, the shadow, the hurt, the sadness, the grief. And most of us, when we experience great stress or confusion, we respond with emotion, from emotion. From emotion, with emotion. That's how we tend to respond. That's just human nature. But we need to be able to step out of that animal brain and step back into a place of peace. And then descend into the heart and say, well, what's really the truth here? What's really the truth? Can I forgive the offender? And yet simultaneously, can I speak to them from a place of love? And so forgiveness doesn't mean you agree with them. It doesn't mean that you think what they said or did was right. Forgiveness starts with a willingness to see that the policeman, or the person of the opposite race, or the bias, or whatever it is, that they too are God. They're my brother, my sister, a fellow light being on the path. And so how shall we respond? Kyle writes. First with clarity, and clarity comes through stepping back. And second with love, true love, not emotional love. And then third with strength. The strength is the willingness to stay in the fire when it's hot, but not react to the fire, not overreact to the fire. Stay in the fire when it's hot, but not overreact. And so this mediation process that I used to do, I'm actually still doing it, but less so now than I had in the past. It really taught me the skill of how to sit in a fire without completely losing my cool. And if we do lose our cool, what is the teaching? It's to begin again. This ancient Buddhist teaching is to begin again. You drop the ball, you begin again. You get overwhelmed by sadness or anger or rage, you begin again. You get lost in a mental thought or story, we begin again. We begin again. And so this is our path, is to begin again. Begin again. And so Kyle, beautiful question, my friend. Beautiful question. And yes, we should definitely act. The last part of his question is, how do we know when we should act politically and socially? We should always be acting politically and socially. But the thing we must understand is we must act consciously politically and consciously socially. The greatest power that we have is not our vote once every 4 years. The greatest power we have is how we spend our dollars. Every day we're voting with our dollars. Every day. And so whether you choose to purchase food that comes from a factory farm, or choose to purchase food that comes from an organic farm, whether you choose to buy a big diesel truck that's polluting the environment and a massive house that you don't need, and whether you're choosing what companies you support, what organizations you support. And if you look at, say, something like what's going on politically with the race relations in the United States, a great conversation is, what nonprofits are there in my community? Do I support them that create this type of dialogue? In the past, I've been a part of so many nonprofits that I get in trouble because I get so spread thin. And so it's because there's something within me that wants to give, that wants to share. And so I encourage you to look at, how do you spend your money? How do you spend your time? What are the groups you support? How are you showing up? Are you showing up with a fistful of rocks and spray paint? Are you unconsciously just supporting the police and the far right? Or are you willing to look and communicate with the other side in your daily conversations? Are you willing to walk across the aisle? Are you willing to walk to the other side of the railroad tracks and to connect with perhaps, neighbors or people you don't know, you've never spoken to before? Are you willing to open your heart and smile? And smile. And so, beautiful question, Kyle. Thank you. Sometimes the best thing we can do is just stay inside and let the storm blow on by. And after the storm has blown by, then, as we see clearly, because our emotions have released, we see clearly, then we ask, how shall I respond? How shall I respond with love? Okay, so here's a question from Wesley. Hi again, Craig. A question about context as pure awareness and contents as in the mind. The first step in waking up is recognizing yourself as the context, as no thing, as the pure space of awareness free of contents. In other words, you are the sky, not the clouds. The work after that, it seems, is to collapse the distance between you, the sky, and the contents of experience, the clouds. I wonder, Craig, are you still capable of separating your sky-like true nature out from experience? Can you still access pure space, or does that capacity eventually dissolve? Does the distinction completely collapse, or do you always maintain the ability to fall back, so to speak, into unbound space? Thanks. I hope that makes sense. Yes, Wesley, I'll just say this. My experience is very multidimensional, and more often than not, it's both and neither. It's always a possibility too. Both and neither. And so one of the things that's happened with me is the context, vast spacious awareness, and contents have collapsed into each other. One of the great realizations that I think is very helpful on the path is to see that contents are made of space. Your thoughts are made of space. Your emotions are made of space. Every sensation in your body is literally made of space. And when you begin to see this, there's a real dissolution of vast spacious awareness and having, a thinking mind and a human sense of self. And so maybe I'll back up and see if I can say that a different way. Like you said, the first stage of non-dual awakening is waking up as vast spacious awareness. There's great freedom in that. And most people, when they step into vast spacious awareness, after a period of time, they notice thoughts arise. And when you first notice these thoughts arise, they are often seen as a disturbance. That contents are a disturbance. Thoughts are a disturbance. Emotions are a disturbance. My ego is a disturbance. And then it's my child is a disturbance. My work life is a disturbance. My parents are a disturbance. Everything that makes a noise is a disturbance. But if you start looking at that, you realize the space of awareness does not view life as a disturbance, because that's divisive. So the space of awareness must learn to see contents as its own self. If we're unable to see that space is in everyone and everything, the space is in a protester and the police. The space is in the riots and the riot squad. Space is in them both. If we cannot see that, the awakening is not, it's not fuller. If our awakening is simply, I am the sky, and then there's contents in the sky, there's division. And one of the things that I found along the path is I wanted to know freedom without division. And so anywhere there was division within me, and continues to be division, I look at that and say, well, what is this division about? What is this division about? Why is there division here? Can I open that door to division? Can I meet it with love? Can I meet it with space? Can I see there is space inherently within this? I have a couple people in my life right now that still give me a hard time. And if I look at them from the perspective of ego, which I'm capable of doing, I'm capable of identifying, just dropping fully into ego. I should say fully, but I can identify into ego, and I can greatly suffer. I can step fully back. And then the person who's given me a hard time and I become one. I can go everywhere in between. I can see that this person who's given me a hard time is God. I can see they are my very face. I can see that my face and their face are one. I can see the journey of these two souls together, these two human selves, here to rub against each other and to create a sense of growth. And so part of living in mastery, or developing a sense of mastery, it comes through the ability to travel into different realms, different worlds, different perspectives. There's this old idea that one perspective is the right perspective. The perspective of nirvana or cosmic consciousness is the right perspective. And even if you look at that holding on to that ideal as there's one right way, you must always be in space, or the space must have collapsed into nothingness. It's all awareness, it's all nothingness, it's all emptiness, it's only cosmic consciousness, it's all God, it's only Brahma, it's only Atma. All these are simply perspectives of the way the Absolute can manifest. And so I could go on and on about this, but I think you get the gist. It's important, very important, to know who and what you are in a relative way and an absolute way. Relative level, absolute level. And the million levels in between. And so when I'm with my 6-year-old daughter, I'm not going to show up, as vast, spacious emptiness. I'm going to show up as her dad. And just be her dad. And hopefully have a big loving heart while I'm in her presence. If she's not driving me a little bit crazy. And so it's important on planet Earth to be able to operate in all the different realms with skillfulness and mastery. So great question, Wes. Here's a question from Ellie. Ellie writes, after doing some light yin yoga today, Craig, I've noticed I initially felt more relaxed, but only to be bombarded later by more anxiety and depression, and feeling very ungrounded. Should I continue the yoga practice? Yes, absolutely, Ellie. One of the things that most of us don't understand or need to develop more fully is patience on the spiritual path. Is patience. If we look at our evolutionary nature, which is another quality of consciousness, Wes, our evolutionary nature is it's always evolving. So we have an aspect of self which is absolute, so it's perfect always since the day we were born, and of course before that. But we're born into an evolutionary nature in an evolutionary world. And so this evolutionary nature, our human body, our personality, our egoic nature, all of this is growth-based. And oftentimes growth is very much like working out or stretching or going to massage therapy. Like if you get on a massage table, oftentimes it'll feel really good during the hour you're getting the massage. But 2 hours later, your body will start to detox. Because all that pain and trauma, which is actually stored in the fatty cells in your body, is released into your bloodstream, and you feel a sense of toxicity often after a massage. And so should we stop getting massage if it feels bad later on? No. Same is true with yoga. When you're doing yoga, in the beginning, oftentimes it feels good. You start to open. But then later in the day, like Ellie is writing, he was feeling ungrounded. And maybe some anxiety was coming forward. So when you do yoga, you're opening your chakra centers. and you're stepping into a space of fluidity, a space of divinity. But as the light begins to intensify, and you start to move your body and stretch your body in ways you haven't before, anxiety is freed, it's released, and you may feel a little bit ungrounded. Does that mean we should stop yoga? Absolutely not. This is actually a sign we are healing. We're healing. Same is true of exercising. Now, I make this mistake a couple times a year. I've always wanted to be a runner. I have the body of a runner, but for some reason, when I do run, it causes great pain in my back. So a couple times a year, I say, okay, I'm going to start running again. First day, I'll go out and I'll do a run. I'll probably run a little bit further than I should at 9,000 feet. And then the next, and I feel really good. It just feels great to be out in the woods running. And then the next day, my whole body is just hurting. My back is hurting. My shoulders are hurting. My neck's hurting. The legs and the muscles are hurting. And then I make an egoic decision. This doesn't feel good. And so I stop. And that's the end of my running career a couple times a year. Now, for some reason, I can mountain bike all day long. And I do so without hurting my body. And so I just do what's easy. But don't use me as my running example as the example of the way to go. That's how the ego operates. If it feels good, I do more. If it doesn't feel good, I stop. But when we look at healing, we have to look at the long journey. The same way, like if we want to look at healing of our environment, if we want to look at healing of race relations, we have to look at a long-term journey. Am I willing to communicate with aspects of myself which I've ignored, which feel numb, which feel dead, which feel angry, which feel upset, which feel sad, or feel hurt? So the same way you heal your body is the same way you heal, say, community, race relations. It's the willingness to have these conversations, to sit in the fire over and over and over again. And so sometimes, like when, with a protest, you go to a protest, it feels good to be speaking your truth, expressing yourself. But then the ego comes forward and, someone starts pushing and things start getting violent. And then we go back to the status quo where both parties are throwing rocks at each other and becoming more entrenched. But if that was the end of our healing journey, we wouldn't go anywhere. We have to go back to this ancient Buddhist practice of begin again. So we begin the conversation again. And each time it's, can we do it more skillfully, more open-heartedly, more compassionately, more gently? And Ellie, with your question, can I do this? Can I hang in there more patiently? Can I see that if anxiety is coming forward after doing yoga, it's coming forward to be healed? And so can I develop a sense of patience? And can I breathe more deeply and fully into the anxiety that I'm feeling and experiencing? It's a beautiful question, my friend. Here's another question. This is from Colleen. Craig, what are your thoughts on EMDR therapy? Anger/rage explosive episodes have lessened after awakening, but still haunt this person. Wondering about investigating further into the idea that I may have PTSD. I grew up with a violent, raging mother. It's sometimes confusing how this all fits in with awakening. And that last part of your questions I want to address. It's somehow confusing, it being my human emotion and trauma. My human emotion and trauma is somehow confusing in how it fits in with awakening. Our understanding of spiritual awakening must be vast. It must be loving. It must be inclusive. If our idea of awakening does not include all of life, then this is simply a partial awakening. And it's a disease that plagues the spiritual community. As we have this idea that we are waking up to the absolute and only the absolute and excluding our human self. If we have this type of awakening and rest only in this type of awakening, you begin to realize my awakening has peace, but it does not have love. If we are waking up and it does not include love, if it does not include inclusivity, then there is something greatly off here. Awakening is vast, spacious, free, absolutely loving and inclusive, and strong and powerful. And so our definition of awakening must have these three qualities. If it does not, we'll simply be lopsided. And so back to Colleen's question. Craig, do you have any thoughts on EMDR? Yeah, my thought is, with any healing modality, try it out and see if your body responds. Try it out and see if your body responds. Well, the shadow side of EMDR is that many people are attracted to therapies that are sold as quick fixes. Now, EMDR, I'm in the world of psychology. I've been in the world of psychology. EMDR has often been sold as a quick fix. And the problem with quick fixes is they don't work. And people have known this since the beginning of time. In the olden days, my grandmother used to speak about the snake oil salesman coming to town. So if anyone says, come see me for EMDR, one session, all your PTSD will resolve. Chiropractors unfortunately often sell this. Come to me, I'll just crack you real quick, 1, 2, 3. Let me tell you the 3 steps to enlightenment and you'll be eternally healed. When we buy into these types of modalities, we are dismissing this fact. It's just a cold truth that we live in an evolutionary universe. Healing takes time and healing is messy. Healing requires perseverance. Healing requires unconditional love. Healing requires unconditional strength. Healing requires unconditional patience and peace. And if you look at what's required with healing, you begin to see that through the process of healing, God is teaching you how to be awake in the relative world. So in order to heal, you have to have clarity and peace. You have to learn unconditional love, and you have to learn unconditional strength. And in order to experience an ongoing abiding awakening, you have to have unconditional peace, unconditional love, unconditional strength. And that's the beautiful thing about being forced to heal, is it faces you to do the work. So my thoughts about EMDR, I think it's great. Go give it a run. But when I say go give it a run, I tell people go once and see if it is for you. And if it is for you, go 5, 6, 10 times and then see what happens. I tell people to do yoga every single day. And so when people struggle with trauma, with pain, with confusion, with feeling unworthy, sadness, guilt, rage, addiction, whatever it is, you can't go to therapy once. You can't try meditation once. You can't try yoga once. Yoga must be a lifestyle. Therapy must be a lifestyle. And by that I mean we must develop a healthy psychological nature. If we don't love ourselves, we're never going to heal. If we don't love ourselves, we're not going to wake up and stay awake. If we don't have a connection with peace, with spaciousness, if we don't value our own humanity, you cannot value God and not simultaneously value yourself. You have to value both. They are one and the same. But if you only value God and you dismiss your human self, you'll have a gaping wound, a gaping shadow, an ego that won't shut up. And you'll be unstable. And so whatever the modality is, whether it's acupuncture or massage therapy, chiropractics, give it a good run. You know, a lot of times people come and see me and they'll see me once a year, and they'll come back the next year and say, well, nothing really changed since our last session. I said, well, did you do some of the work? Oftentimes we need deeper support. I literally met with my teachers thousands of times. You know, I've done thousands of sessions of body work. I've seen so many chiropractors I can't even remember, and acupuncture and this and that, and healers. So spiritual awakening is about a lifestyle change. A lifestyle change. And unless we are changing our lifestyle, then the awakening, if we do experience an awakening, it will come and then it will go. If when awakening does come, we must do our part to support it. To support it. We must do our part to support it. To support it. Okay. Let's see here. Just going to look at some more questions here. Here's a question from one of my favorite people, Richard Camp. Richard writes, "Hi Craig, I have a question. What is the nature of healing itself?" What is the nature of healing itself? And I want to make the distinction that I'm not asking how we heal, i.e. the process of healing, which there are many. I'm asking about the very essence of healing itself. What is happening when we heal? Oh, that's a beautiful question, Richard. The nature of healing. What's the essence of healing itself? Basically, as we walk through the healing process, we're burning up karma, we're burning up old habits. So the essence of healing, what is it? It's the energy of Kali. It's the energy of fire. It's the energy of transformation. It's literally the energy of awakening. But awakening in the relative is what the essence of healing is. What is happening when we heal? The fire of transformation is happening. The fire of transformation. We're giving birth to something new. We're opening a new possibility, a new realm. What's happening when we heal? God is giving birth into creation. And so I want you to imagine this. Back in the 1960s, there was these, similar thing as today, these riots going on. And there was this, sweet flower girl. And she came right up and faced, one of the National Guardsmen. And she took a daisy, a daisy flower, and she put it down the barrel of his M1 rifle. How beautiful is that? That's God giving birth. That brings tears to my eyes. That's God giving birth in that moment. It's God giving birth on planet Earth. Something greater is giving birth. That's what's happening. Boy, Richard, what a beautiful question. What is the nature of healing itself? The nature is like an explosive love. An explosive love. Thank you for that. Here's a question from Brent. Hi, Craig. Do you have any insight on meat eating with kundalini awakening process. I've been advised by doctors to eat nothing but meat to manage an autoimmune condition. Certainly helps for my physical health, but I'm concerned about my spiritual development. Brent, yeah, I'm going to invite you to feel into this yourself. I eat a mostly vegan diet because that's what's true in my heart. If the doctor is telling you you need to eat it because of eat because of an autoimmune condition, listen to the doctor and see what happens. See what happens if you shift your diet. But there's different levels of eating meat. If we eat meat from a factory farm and we're living on hot dogs, we are creating and supporting a ridiculous amount of pain, unnecessary pain and suffering on planet Earth. This winter when I was driving to San Diego to teach on a retreat, down along the border for some reason, the southern border of Arizona, there are these massive factory farm plants, and the smell that just comes out of them, the darkness, the hell realm. You can feel just this immense hell realm of just suffering that's there. And so if we're supporting that, that's not good for your spiritual development, because you're turning a blind eye to the suffering of our four-legged friends. But if you're getting your meat from a farm that where the animals are treated well, that's part of life here on planet Earth, my friend. And so if I look at your question more clearly, you said it certainly helps. The Dalai Lama is in the same conundrum. He tried for years to live as a vegetarian and as a vegan, and every time he did, he got so ridiculously sick. And so I encourage you, you need to listen to your body. And not all of us were born with a body that can live on vegetables like me. And so, I encourage you just to be conscious about your diet. And you can always try it, for a couple months or a couple years and just see how you feel. Eating what the doctors are telling you to eat. And then, see if you can shift later on in life and see if anything changes. The thing about the body is its ability to heal itself is so immense. And so I encourage you just to see. See what comes. Here's another question I have. This is a question about kundalini, so I'll just answer it because there was one by Brent about kundalini. One more thing is, Brent, if you're doing any of that to get grounded, you can also eat lots of carrots and vegetables, and carrots, potatoes, and beets, root vegetables, help get you grounded. But you said yours had to do with an autoimmune disorder, so just do what you need to do to take care of your body, Brent. Okay, here's a question. This is a fun one I get every couple months from Jacob. Hi, Craig. I'm wondering your opinion on semen retention in regards to affecting the chakras. I've been feeling ungrounded and low on energy after the release of semen, and also with awareness of entities feeding off the energy. There's all this yogic science about this topic of semen retention. And what I encourage you to do, Jacob, is just to practice and see what works for you. Some people, when they choose to be celibate, it creates so much internal energy, so much pressure within their nervous system, and too much energy gets stuck in the nervous system. And so it can be helpful not to be celibate. For other people, they need to be celibate for a period of time. I've gone back and forth throughout my life in periods of celibacy. And, the whole thing with the first chakra is there is so much evolutionary and creative energy in that chakra center. what I've learned to do is to have a balanced approach with this. Of course, I'm married and have kids and this and that, so I'm not living as a celibate monk, but it's important that we have a balance. If we're letting go of this, 7 days a week, yeah, you're going to feel exhausted. That's just true of any man. But, you have to feel into your body. A lot of it has to do with age. And, if you're a young guy, there could be a lot more release. If you're older, a lot less, or you start to feel incredibly exhausted. And the other thing, too, is when we're choosing a partner, we want to choose a partner who is healthy, who's sane, who mirrors us on the spiritual path. And if we have anything off in the realm of our human intimacy, the chakras will open, they'll close, they'll shut, they'll shut down, they'll be traumatized, whatever it is. And so I encourage you just to play with this. And, this is more probably for a question for a session, like an individual session with me. And we'll look at your life, who you're with, how often. And, in yoga, in the yogic traditions, ancient yogic traditions, there's a tremendous amount of writing on this topic. And one of the reasons there was so much writing on this topic is because inherently within spiritual traditions, monastic traditions, there's all this heavy teachings on celibacy and rules about if you're not celibate, terrible things will happen. And a lot of that was just fear to keep monks and to keep nuns. Because if they were dating each other and having families, they wouldn't have a monastery anymore. And, in the Christian tradition, there's so much guilt and shame around it. It's just a big shadow. And so just be cautious anytime you're reading anything about physical intimacy in spiritual text, because often it was written by a monk or nun or priest who has no business writing about this. Okay, here's another question. Hi, Craig. When one's shadow has been mostly integrated, is that person still able to discern shadow areas in others? Absolutely. Or does sensing a shadow in others always indicate one is projecting aspects of their own shadow? No. So the clearer you are, and the more work you do on yourself, you begin to see that you are divine and everyone is divine. And then I'll say that another way. When you're doing work on yourself and you find confusion within your own self, and you begin to work with healing that confusion, you'll also be able to see that same confusion in you as in your neighbor. So recently, I'll say something just generally speaking. Recently, two of my colleagues, I had interactions with them that were really off, and they were way out there, lost in their egos, lost in pain and suffering and confusion. And because I've done my work, and I can see that I'm divine, I can also see that these two individuals who were harming me and causing me pain and confusion and, attacking me or dismissing me or whatever it was they were doing, I could still see that both of those beings were God. Yet simultaneously, I could see both of their shadows. And so the more work you do on yourself, the more you see that you are divine and everyone and everything is divine. The more work you do on yourself, the more you realize everything is within me. So that, the police who are wanting to squash the riots and the rioters and the punks and, who are creating the riots, I have both those within me. I can see both. And I can also see the divinity in both. And so the more work you do on yourself, you begin to step into this paradox of you see that everyone is God. Everything is God. And you see that anything that's within another is also within you. If anyone spends a decade in meditation, you'll see mania is within you. Depression is within you. Bipolar is within you. Schizophrenia is within you. And when you find it within yourself and you learn to work with it within yourself, when a friend exhibits mania or depression or sadness or guilt or rage or fear or racism or throwing rocks, there's a perspective of understanding. Oh, I understand why this person is throwing rocks. I understand why this person is wanting them to stop throwing rocks. I understand bias. I understand racism. I understand violence. I understand greed. I understand lust. I understand judgment. I understand what it's like to be an offender. I understand what it's like to be a victim. So this is the birthing of compassion. Through you looking at your own shadow, you begin to see that my shadow is God's shadow, is humanity's shadow. We all have it. My teacher used to say this again and again. There is one human mind, and we all have it. We all have it. If we play the us and them game, I'm woke and they're not, I'm awake and you're not, boy, that just sounds like division. That sounds like I'm right and you're left. I'm right and you're wrong. It just sounds like ego. But when we can see the person who's attacking us, offending us, confusing us, our friends struggling with mental illness, when we can see that us and them are one, when we can see I know that experience. Like if any of my friends ever go temporarily mentally ill, I have absolute faith and trust they will heal. That they will heal. If I offend you, if I say the wrong thing, I have absolute faith and trust that you will heal. I believe in your divinity first and foremost. And can I see your shadow at times? Sure. Can I see my shadow at times? Sure. And please let us not think that we get to a place where we don't have a shadow. Anything that has a form has a shadow. There's a difference between having a massive shadow and a small shadow. And the idea is we want to have a small shadow. But we'll never get to a place where we don't have a shadow. A positive way of saying a shadow is our shadow is our evolving edge. And because none of us were born perfected beings, in a relative sense, there's always going to be a shadow. A shadow is our evolving edge. It continues into infinity here on planet Earth. And I even say this, even in the heaven realms, as long as you have a soul, you have an evolving edge. And if you have an evolving edge, there's always something you're growing into. So you're growing into something greater and letting go of something lesser. And back to Richard's question, that is the essence of healing. Letting go of something lesser, growing into something greater. And it's the nature of God. You know, with the Big Bang, the nature of God was boom. I'm exploding outward. And I'm giving birth to greater and greater manifestations of divinity in complexity, with complexity, if I can say that word, with complexity. And so can I be awake? Can I be human? Can I look at my shadow? One of the projections that I make, to use that word, Wes, is I project onto everyone that everyone is awake And by that I mean in a relative sense. Everyone is already awake in an absolute sense. But the projection that I have is we all project our own experience on others. I project everyone is awake. So whenever I sit down with an individual, I assume they're awake. And then if they have a big gaping shadow, they'll show me. If I have a big gaping shadow, I will show them. And the beautiful thing about that is even that dance of shadows rubbing against each other is an impersonal force of evolution. And this is another way God is giving birth into form. And so God will cause me to rub you the wrong way and you to rub me the wrong way. And that will create the spark, the fire for uncomfortability, which creates the spark or fire for healing. For healing. But there's also what Sri Aurobindo's teaching friend, Mother Mira Alfonso, she had a different teaching. She said there's a sunlit path. So instead of us rubbing each other the wrong way, and growing, just through, just friction, can we grow through flow? Can we grow through taking the higher way? Can we take the easy path? And the easy path is listening to your heart and coming into relationship with God's will. If you want to take the hard path, listen to the collective consciousness, and let's all just start throwing rocks at each other. Or beating each other with, batons and tear gas and this and that. It's like, what kind of world do we want to live in? Do we want to be a caveman? Or do we want to be a Buddha? Do we want to be a Buddha? And so, okay, here's a question from David. Hi, Craig, I have a question. I've been noticing a lot of chaos and pain in the collective consciousness. Yes, and in my own life, there has been chaos. No water in my house, then a big leak, and then the trolls on the Zoom call tonight. How do you make sense of the interplay of things moving through the collective in our own lives? One of the things I can say, and I was actually speaking to Richard about this, is that it seems there's moments in history where astrological signs line up and just everything, everything hits the fan at once. Everything breaks down at once. There's a classic Mercury in retrograde, but like right now what we're having is something massive. We're having this massive tipping point. When the coronavirus came about, the same type of stars were aligned as were aligned at 9/11. And the world just went into another period of darkness with, all these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's such chaos and confusion. And it seems the stars aligned again a certain way. And we're at each other's throats here. Everyone's losing their jobs, and we're probably going into a Great Depression. And I don't mean to say these negative things, but it's just a fact here. Is that there's great chaos that's happening right now. And one of the things that happens is throughout history, pressure starts to build in the collective, and then it just snaps. You can't tell everyone to stay home and not work and just expect everything to be smooth sailing. A riot was bound to happen. Humans aren't meant to stay home. They're not meant to do nothing. We are expressive creatures. I spoke about this in the beginning. This energy within us, it needs to move in a direction. And if it doesn't have a healthy outlet to move in, it tends to move into chaos or ego or explosivity or whatever it is. And so if we just look at life here on planet Earth, there is every level of evolutionary nature here on planet Earth. Every level. From awakened Buddhas, like great masters, all the way down to human beings who literally perhaps need to live in a cage. And by that, I mean, they need some jail time and some good rehabilitation time. They need someone to talk to, but within the boundary of a box. There was this terrible thing that happened. I don't know if this is 100% true, but someone was telling me that, like in New York, they let out a lot of people from prison, and they let this one fella out who was, he was like a murderer or violent criminal. And as soon as he got out, he carjacked a car, and then they put him back in jail, but then they let him out again. The reason they were letting criminals out or offenders out was because of the coronavirus. They were afraid that everyone in jail was going to get the virus. And so they let him out a second time, and then he killed someone. And it's like, okay. Like, there's a fella who he doesn't know how to control his body. So he needs to learn some boundaries. And so we have individuals like this on planet Earth. And I've worked in jails before and worked in rehabilitation in jails. And so there's the jail cell itself, and then there's the rehabilitation that needs to happen. Where someone has, someone who believes in them, who cares about them, who sees them as God, who helps them to heal, who helps them to grow. And then there's living saints, and there's everything in between. And see, right now on planet Earth, we have all levels of evolution, and we're in the middle of a crisis. And when we have every level of evolution and crisis happens, the individuals who are ostracized, who are disenfranchised, who were forgotten, who were abused, who were ignored, who were neglected, who spent too long in a jail cell, whatever it was. Pain tends to boil to the surface during crisis. Things tend to break. And whether it's your computer breaking, like a couple weeks ago, one of my computers broke, and whether your car breaks down, whether you lose your job, whether you lose your mind, which sometimes that happens to the best of us. Sometimes we lose our mind. This is part of the experience of being human. But again, when we lose our mind, can we pick up the practice of begin again? Can I step into the truth again? These characters who came in this evening to the Zoom call and created chaos within our Zoom call, our lovely experience of Satsang. Life is going to give them the opportunity to begin again. Like all these characters who came in, of course, I adore them, I forgive them, they disturbed me, but I love them. And God will invite them to begin again, and not begin the chaos again. I'm sure that they will begin that again. But eventually they'll realize, oh, there's another way to live. Like when I was 14 years old, I did the punk rock thing. I rebelled against society. I took part in riots and this and that. And I've lit streets on fire and done all kinds of crazy things. I've lit swimming pools on fire. I was a kid with a lot of angst, and I did silly things. But God continually gave me this opportunity of begin again, Greg. Begin again. Set foot on the path again. And so, when chaos comes, we have to remember to begin again. We have to come back to the truth. We have to begin again. If we don't begin again in relationship to our heart and the truth, well, we'll just revert. And, I know I've said this before, but oftentimes, if you step back and look at a culture from a perspective of like sociology or anthropology, you'll see at these tipping points in history, the culture has a choice. So if a crisis arises, and it's a wonderful opportunity for us to awaken together or for us to take a giant backward step. And, in the country of Afghanistan was used as an example of this. The country of Afghanistan has a rich and brilliant history. All these brilliant minds have come out of Afghanistan, but in the last, couple hundred years, because there's been war after war after war in Afghanistan, the country keeps taking this backward step. So anytime they're given an opportunity, and again, an opportunity through war, to choose to step into something greater, the Afghans have oftentimes chosen to take a backward step and to become more fundamentalist, more tribal. And I love Afghanis, by the way, so don't think that's a comment. I have great respect for the people of Afghanistan. They're some of the most wonderful people on the planet. But from a cultural perspective, there's something that's happened there where, through such violence, people just keep taking a backward step. And we have to choose collectively, when we come to a tipping point like this, when we feel this pressure building, are we going to go in the streets and start rioting? Or are we going to shine our light brighter than we ever have before? Are we going to shine it brighter than we ever have before? One of the most beautiful things I heard was the story by Tony Hawk, and Tony Hawk, the skateboarder. And he was speaking about these girls in Afghanistan. It was at a girls' school, I think, in Kabul. And he has some nonprofit, and I don't know what he was doing there. I think he was helping to help them create a school with a skate park. And he had all these just great stories of these young girls who were learning how to skateboard and having so much fun on a skateboard. And also, despite the tribalism and telling them that the women weren't allowed to study, they're saying, basically, screw it. There's something within this that's brave, and we're going to go forward and begin again with our education, despite being ostracized, despite being attacked, despite people throwing rocks at us. And the funny thing about skateboards in Afghanistan is girls aren't allowed to play sports in Afghanistan, according to, say, like Sharia law. And but a skateboard is seen as a toy, not as a sport in Afghanistan. So girls are allowed to skateboard, at least, in Kabul. And I thought that was a beautiful thing. And through, skateboarding together, they're creating a community, they're creating a sangha, they're creating strength, and they're learning together, they're growing together, they're going to school together. And it was just a beautiful story. So I thought I'd share. I spent a long time on a skateboard. Okay, let's see. So I'm getting near the end, but a couple more questions. Hi, Craig. What are your Colleen, I answered the question about EMDR therapy. I hope you get a chance to listen to the response. If you missed it, just hit the replay on the Facebook Live. Here's a question from Surya. Hi, Craig. Can you speak to letting go of the illusion of control? How do you address control issues? Thank you. This is a beautiful question. Whenever your body or your mind, your egoic nature, is attempting to control, it's doing so because it does not feel safe. And so if we're trying to control a situation, an outcome, the quickest way to let go of control is to help your body feel safe. This is why I love the practice of yoga. Yoga brings us into the present moment, and it helps us to realize, I am safe. Right here, right now. I'm so safe I can breathe deeply. I'm so safe I can feel my feelings. I'm so safe I can let go of my thoughts. I'm so safe I can relax my body more deeply. And so when your body is deeply relaxed, the psychological force of wanting to control or grasping at control or trying to control or micromanage, it automatically dissolves. So the quickest way to let go of control is to help your body feel safe. Now, some people really have a hard time with feeling safe. And if that's the case, we have to learn to self-soothe. So many people self-soothe through cigarettes, through overeating, through watching Netflix. These are egoic ways of self-soothing, through drinking, through addiction, through drug use, whatever. But self-soothing comes down to, am I willing to deeply and fully breathe? Just to sit here quietly and deeply and fully breathe while simultaneously feeling what's within me. And so as we do so, we develop this quality of strength, of Buddha strength. And so, can you speak to letting go of the illusion of control, how to address control issues? So oftentimes, control issues arise because we have trauma, because we have fear. If I've been traumatized and I'm with someone else, and the other person I'm with, they start to get out of control, they lose their mind or whatever. If I'm traumatized and I haven't done my own healing work, I won't be able to tolerate the other person being out of control. And then them being out of control makes me feel out of control, and then I'm going to have to try to control, and then we feed off each other. But if someone else around me is out of control, and I've experienced trauma in the past, but I've done my healing work, and then they lose their mind, or they act in a way that's inappropriate or whatever, I will be deeply relaxed, and I'll be able to respond to them with love or with a clear boundary. And I'll see that their losing control has nothing to do with me. So it's a common thing on planet Earth. Oftentimes people try to control others, try to control situations. The number one reason we try to control others is because we have trauma within ourselves. And when someone starts to drive us crazy, it brings up the crazy that's within us, the trauma that's within us, the sadness that's within us. And by crazy, I mean the feelings of overwhelm. The feelings of overwhelm. And so if we're constantly being upset by the outside world, we have to look at that and say, is this about them or is it about me? It's very easy to make it about the other person and say, I need to control them or I need them to stop. But more often than not, we need to stop and do our own healing work. Our own healing work. Okay. And so let me just look here. I think we did a pretty good job here. Just make sure I didn't miss anything. So I want to thank you all for showing up this evening and sharing your hearts with me. And I'm going to challenge you to sit with this question of, can I respond to this moment with love? Can I respond to this moment with love? That's my challenge to you. I'm going to invite you to sit with that question. Can you be a constructive force here on planet Earth, not a destructive force? Can you shine your light and share your love? We are at a tipping point right now on planet Earth. Now more than ever, the world needs your heart, your clarity, your quiet strength, your nobility, your wisdom. This world does not need your ego right now. It doesn't need anyone spitting fire. This world needs love. It needs love. The words of, what's his name? Burt Bacharach? Is that his name? Burt Bacharach, whatever that 70s guy singer was. The world needs love, sweet love. And so, thank you all for your donations, your support. hanging in there with me despite the Zoom attack. And let's send everyone love. The police officers, the National Guards, the rioters, the protesters, the oppressed, the victims, the offenders. Let's send the whole world love. Love, sweet love. Thank you all so much for your patience with me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Bye for now.